I found that support network and it made all the difference. I had some good advice from people too, but to be honest, in the end, like it wasn't the actual advice. It was just the fact that I was like among other people who were maybe going through or recognizing my problems. Like I'm not a crazy person. Like just that validating and reassurance, I think like helped me a lot.
Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Make It Work. And today really excited to have a friend and actually a little bit of a mini coach for me, Merve Hokamp on call. Merve is an ICF accredited executive and business coach and founder of Leadrise Coaching with over a decade of experience leading global teams at Google and with an MBA from INSEAD. Merve empowers business leaders to elevate their careers, build high-performing teams, and drive impactful change. Her unique approach blends strategic insight with empathy, humor, and mindfulness, helping leaders navigate complex challenges and reach their fullest potential. So aside from all the business speak, what I'm really excited to also hear from Merve is her deep personal story and experience of having lived in multiple countries, and she's a mom of two. So very excited to hear about how she blends her multinational experience with her life and work as a coach and how she has transitioned from corporate into coach selling. She has so much to give. I follow her resources on Leadrise, and there's always something personal about what she has to offer. So without further ado, let's welcome Merve.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That is so kind of you. I love those. I get goosebumps hearing you talk. It's great to be here. I'm super excited and thank you for having me. Just to introduce myself and so that people can hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So I am originally from Istanbul, Turkey, born and raised, but then I've lived in many different countries and cultures from Singapore to Austria to France to the United States. And now, of course, in Dublin, we've settled here since 12 plus years ago and counting. And we've made it our home with my husband, Chris, who's American, and my two kids, Maya, who is 7, and Uzma, who's 2.5. And they are a joy to be around. On the career front, as you've said, I come from tech, but before that, I started my career in management consulting. So lots of learnings, lots of working hard, lots of slide decks. And so it was super enriching. I loved it. I was also like very young and energetic. And so I loved that exposure to lots of different industries. But after 5 years, I decided to take a year out and go back to school and did my MBA in France and Singapore. And then after that, I got an offer from Google and stayed with Google for about 11 years in Dublin, and I led teams across sales, marketing, partnerships, cloud, etc. And then more recently, as you said, I stepped out of the corporate world to launch my own business, Leadrise Coaching, which is really my third baby, my third child right now. You also had asked to bring a fun fact. So here's my fun fact. It's that I own my very own cow, in Texas, USA. Her name's Cleopatra. And the story behind that is that my husband's grandparents live on a farm in Texas and they have cows. And it's a fun little tradition that they gift cows to their grandkids and the spouses too. So we get to name them. And every now and then we get a picture of our cow like looking really pretty. So yeah, Cleopatra, she's part of my story.
Yeah, I love that little fun fact. And I guess that's also part of like enjoying the multicultural experience of your
Absolutely.
story, right? So could you let us into your life a little bit? What does it look like? What are your rhythms? What makes you tick?
Yeah. So my rhythm is a lot about flexibility and focus and a bit of fun. So right now I'm my own boss, which of course gives me that freedom to shape my schedule around what I care about the most, which is my family, my clients, my deep work, and my own growth, professional and personal. So people have this romantic idea sometimes that they tell you, they're like, oh, if you work for yourselves, then especially in a field like mine, my business is it's global and mostly it's online. So I can work from anywhere really, as long as I have my laptop, which is great. But people think that, oh, you're just free and work less and hang out on the beach all the time, which sadly is not true. I actually work more than I did in corporate, but I do have that flexibility to shape my day however I like, which is great. And I do what I like and what makes me tick, to your point, right? And so that's what's really fulfilling and freeing. Every day is different, but often we do have a few things that we always do. Mornings start with school drop-offs, of course. and we kind of alternate with my husband, Chris. So we take turns. If it's his morning, then I get to sleep in a little bit. If it's my morning, I wake up really early with the kids. Then what's really important is the coffee, the morning coffee. It's not only is it good because you get the caffeine and like most mornings I actually need it, but also it's just, I like sit down and enjoy it with my kids. And if the kids are already at school, then like I sit down and enjoy it. Like it's my meditation to be sipping my coffee as I start my day, and then a bit of breakfast. Then I dive into client meetings, usually scheduled in the morning. That is my preference. But of course, since I work with global clients, they're from all over. So I kind of have to have afternoons and sometimes even evenings for US clients. So I do have them like spread out. But then I'm very disciplined and military about my focus time. So I also have these like deep work blocks in my calendar. And then I might sprinkle in, some workshops here and there that I'm teaching or that I'm taking. I'm part of a business of coaching program where I'm the student or I'm the mentee, the coachee. So I do lots of personal, professional development things too. And I might put in a yoga session or a massage or something like that every now and then too. So it's very flexible, my schedule, but it's also very like fine tuned and calibrated into like, okay, here's what I'm doing here. Here's what like everything's in calendar. I live in my calendar. So that's that. And then I have some days like Fridays. I don't take any standing client meetings. Every now and then I might make an exception, but I might do workshops sometimes. But oftentimes that's my focus day, like focus work day. Wednesday afternoons, I pick up my daughter from school early, and we do like mom and daughter without my son, who we love, but we like it's important for my older child also to get some parent alone with her parents' time. So we do that. So yeah, it's a mix.
Yeah, I had spoken to you before earlier, and I liked how you termed it as maker time and as a management time.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's my number one productivity hack is to really be intentional about my maker time. Manager time, I don't have to necessarily schedule very intentionally, but the maker time is when I actually get into that zone for that deep focused work, like no distractions allowed. My phone's always on DND anyway. And I have 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours blocks. And I do a bit of Pomodoro, like I'll work for 30 minutes and then I'll close my eyes for like 2 minutes, like meditate, or I'm big on squat breaks. I've recommended it to lots of people. People don't like it. I haven't so far had any takers, but I might like get up and do like 10 squats. It really, it's good for your body physically, but it's good for the brain too. And you're like squat, squat. It just kind of gives you that bit of energy. For instance, I'm launching a program soon. And so I have to create the program content. And so I'll put that into that week's 4 hour block, for example. And in 4 hours, might not be the whole program, but like a good chunk of it, I will have created and no distractions allowed. If people are emailing me, that's great. That's going to wait till I have my like manager time or my admin time. So that's kind of how I manage it. I don't have, just because of the nature of my work, and that's okay. I don't really have these like chunks where every week it's the same day, same block, and I'm religious about it. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I make myself crazy and then I'm not producing. I'm just kind of
Right.
saving the day.
You're just reacting. I really like that. And it's quite an easy takeaway, at least to remember the 4, 3, 2 hour blocks. And this, I guess, is within a week, right? You find these
Yes.
different blocks.
Yes.
And then
That's it.
within that, the Pomodoro technique. Nice. Yeah, I'm curious, did you start with this back in your corporate days, or was this more something that you did it after?
So yes and no. Like corporate days, I started with my manager maker time for sure. Like I would block in my calendar because at Google also like our calendars were shared. So people could just like book meetings. Obviously you could say no. But then if your calendar is open outside of like your meetings and stuff, then people just book you and then you have no time. So then I would have every Friday. I tried to also have Fridays as no meeting days. For the most part, I managed. Every Friday, I would sit down for the following week and I would put in my focus time blocks into my calendar so that I can do my focus work and people aren't booking me. And then I don't have to be in that like reactive world. So
Yeah.
yes, I started at Google. I wasn't as disciplined maybe. And I also wasn't as descriptive as to like how long and if I like needed to do it every week and stuff like that. It wasn't as well calibrated.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
for many of us who are still in corporate world, like it's hard. And so I think thinking about it from your perspective or how you've done it before, it's definitely helpful.
Especially if you're a people manager. then, which I was, because then you have your one-to-ones and you want to have your one-to-ones. They're amazing. But then then your calendar is just blocked. There's really high demand on your time and on your resources. And then your brain is a little bit blocked too. So you really need to be very disciplined about calendar management. This is what I recommend that people do is the manager maker time, but also like you don't want to have your one-to-ones maybe like spread out. Like you don't want to have a 30-minute here and then another 30-minute break and then another like 30-minute one-to-one. Like those 30 minutes in between the two meetings, like is just kind of like waste of time. Often, like you want to have them back to back and then like a longer break. And that can be your maker time. Amazing. Like 2 hours block, do your deep work, like strategic work, and then come back to some meetings, like again, kind of back to back, or like block time for like admin tasks, etc. So I think it's important to be conscious and proactive about your calendar.
Yeah, yeah, I was just firefighting. Well, I like for us to change directions a little bit. I want to talk about motherhood and how that impacted you, your life, your career. And I'm sure it's also affected how you thought about your work after that.
Yes. It's a good question. I mean, becoming a mother is just, and still having a full on career is a big reality check. So I think talk about time, I became hyper efficient with my time for sure. Because when you have to leave the office at 5 p.m. sharp to catch a train, to then get your car from the park and ride, to drive to the daycare for 10 minutes to pick up your child, like 10 minutes before daycare closes, like you need to be really well calibrated and like everything needs to fit. And you need to make every minute count when you're at work because you still have the same deliverables. You still want to achieve the same impact. So there's no room for dragging things out. Time efficiency and laser focus, I would really highlight as something that I learned or that changed. I think then, of course, I became more resilient. I became more maybe patient. It teaches you that motherhood, especially having multiple kids, I would say, because then they have their own demands, but then they have like common demands and then they have like conflicting demands. And then you just kind of have to like meet or manage or each thing. So I think you need to be really resilient and patient and like a good listener. I think, I took this workshop in negotiations, which I'd like to think I have a few tricks up my sleeve, but most of my examples actually come from like me with my kids. I used to think I was a good negotiator, but after having kids, like that's when you really learn negotiation is when you're trying to sell like veggies to your toddler. So, and then trying to kind of negotiate, well, if you eat this broccoli, then I may give you this, like, and this might happen if like I might compromise on this if you do this thing. So they're amazing natural negotiators, kids. So I think that's very humbling and then of course incredibly enriching and great fun. Yeah. And then I think like on a broader level, I have maybe it's given me that like renewed sense of purpose, so to speak. I think I'm very protective of my time and what I do with my time, even when I'm not with my kids, right? Like just because I just want to be fully present with my kids and I want to have this like romantic idea, maybe, or idealistic idea of impact in the world. Like, because children are amazing. Like, and I just want the like next generation to grow in ways that is really flourishing for the humankind or something like that. But it does give me that kind of trigger to rethink maybe what success really means. Before kids, like it was maybe all about climbing the corporate ladder and like achieving more and like consistently pushing forward. Now success looks a little bit differently, like it's more about balance and fulfillment and making an impact, like I was saying, like that aligns with my values and with what I want for the humankind, like or the future of humankind. So yeah, I think like that with the kids. And during COVID, we were home with our then 3-year-old. Maya was 3. And I realized how much I had been missing out on her, even though like we still wanted to be present and everything, pick her up early from daycare whenever we could and everything. It just wasn't the same, of course. Like, so when she was at home, like it was this gift that it was hectic, of course, and it had its challenges, but it was this gift that gave me a little bit of extra perspective and about impact and about life and how I want to like shape my life and like how it's meaning think of meaning and success as a holistic thing and not just like work, career.
Wonderful. Yeah, definitely. I think in the wheel of matrescence, which learned about this whole process of becoming a mom, there's so many different aspects. There's work, there's your political beliefs, your religious beliefs that like are really impacted. And I think for a lot of ambitious, modern, educated women, it impacts the whole idea of work and how you look at success, right? So yeah, like really, I identify with what you're saying about wanting to achieve corporate ambition. But when with kids, it's sort of come on with a different flavor of maybe like legacy. Yeah, building something that lasts beyond myself. So yeah, definitely resonate there.
100%. Yeah.
Actually, I hear about your multicultural background and how that influences your upbringing with your kids and also your work.
Yeah. So I do have a multicultural family, but I have to say I actually myself grew up in a very single cultural environment, very Turkish environment. I'm an only child, and then my parents and then my wider family, they didn't speak other languages, they didn't speak English. Turkish is my native language, obviously. They didn't really travel much, certainly not outside the country. And they were very open minded, like they would have. It just wasn't their life. And interestingly, and in a cool way, my husband's family is very similar. Like they're very American and again, very open minded people about cultures. Like they read about it and everything, but they don't speak other languages. They haven't really traveled or lived abroad or anything. So we had kind of very single track, like single cultural, maybe, or monocultural, is that what we call it, upbringings. But then of course, like we were both very interested from early on in our childhood. Like we wanted to learn other languages, we wanted to travel the world, we wanted to experience different cultures, like both of us. And that's kind of what brought us together when we met in Vienna, Austria, where we were both studying abroad and learning German. So there you go. So that's that. But then our children and our lives right now, of course, like he's American, I'm Turkish, we live in Ireland. So our kids like are living a whole different experience. They're Turkish, American, Irish, they're bilingual, and then they also are learning Irish at school, which is a completely different language too than English, than Turkish. So they're also like learning a different language system. They're exposed to multiple cultures. The elementary school that my daughter goes to is also, there's like, she has Chinese friends and she has Serbian friends and she has Japanese friends and she has Albanian friends and she has French friends and one of her friends is Dutch. And so it's very different. I think like the culture aspect of our lives is also very much of a kind of a mix, different cultures and different value systems as well, which we love.
And it's probably something that helped you as well in the work that you do right now.
Yes,
Coaching
absolutely. So
clients.
yes. I think first of all, that gives me hopefully some perspective. Like I think it has made me more open-minded. I think it has made me more curious. Like I started with curiosity. That's why I did what I did. But then also I think it has made me even more curious, genuinely and authentically. I'd like to think in people's stories. So when people come to me and they tell me their corporate story or whatever challenges they might be having with their business, et cetera, or leadership challenges, then I'm, I think, innately curious and just have an open mind, which helps. And then the like mechanics and the technicality as well, I think, of the work that I do. I don't fluently speak so many languages, but I've been exposed to different languages. So like I have French clients, but I lived in France and I'm kind of exposed and I know a few expressions and I know like kind of some of their values, that cultural values that I can like speak to or I can give examples from like as they're talking to me. So I think it kind of makes that little like connection, I think, easier that way. I tell my story on my website, like my LinkedIn profile and everything. Like I tell my story, but I don't necessarily market or advertise to people who are expats, but I attract a lot of expats just because I guess people are attracted to other people who are like-minded. Some of their challenges might be related to cultural experience or cross-cultural experience.
Great. So Merve, on the surface, everything looks great, but I'm sure that it's come with a lot of ups and downs. So I would love for you to share maybe a difficult moment in your own personal or professional life and how you found the resources to come out of it and what you got out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, I have, as you say, like I'm very happy with my business. It is my third baby. I'm very grateful, but of course it comes with lots of challenges daily. I think also just thinking about the overarching theme of this podcast, I think I might speak to some of my mom moments that were kind of dark. I think one of the hardest times I'd say was when my first kid was born. We had just moved to a new neighborhood and bought a house, and I was new to motherhood without much experience. Like I'm an only child, and I didn't have any like cousins or anything like who I would babysit. So I kind of felt completely out of my depths. My parents came to support me, which was of course incredibly helpful, but I was also recovering myself from a 24 plus hour labor that ended up in an emergency C-section. So I had to recover from the labor itself. And then also like from the surgery, my husband was really helpful. But when my husband was going to work every day, and then when my parents finally left, I felt quite lonely and really overwhelmed too, like just trying to navigate everything on my own. I didn't have a lot of friends around me in Ireland who were also moms, again, new neighborhood. Like at some point, I just kind of realized that I can't do it alone anyway. And I started reaching out, which initially kind of felt very maybe like inorganic or unnatural. Like, but there were a few communities on WhatsApp or on Facebook. And one mom built a community in our new development. I found that support network and I built that support network, and it made all the difference. I had some good advice from people too, but to be honest, in the end, like it wasn't the actual advice. It was just the fact that I was like among other people who were maybe going through or recognizing my problem, saying like, oh yeah, breastfeeding, super rewarding and amazing, of course, but also it sucks. And I was like, okay, good. Like I'm not a crazy person. Like just that validating and reassurance, I think like helped me a lot. And then not that we're quantifying, but maybe an even darker period would have been when my second child was on the way. It was during COVID towards the end of the pandemic. And, I had some pregnancy complications, which wasn't easy. Then we got COVID as a whole family. And then my dad, who was young, had always been healthy, got sick very suddenly, and then passed away also suddenly. Like we thought he was recovering, but he passed away suddenly one night, collapsed, never came back. And that was just a week before my son was born. It was March 8th, and then my son was born March 16th. So it was one thing after another, and such a difficult time, and balancing that grief and losing a parent with the arrival of a new baby who amazingly was healthy and like of course an amazing addition to our family and to our lives. But that's the irony of life. So I was caring for my 4.5-year-old at the time, and then my newborn, and then grieving my dad, and then supporting my mom. And yeah, it was very tough to say the least. But again, I think reaching out to my support network. And I think it's like at this point, it's maybe oversaid, but it really is okay to not be okay. So just maybe saying like, I don't feel great, but it is what it is, I think has made me maybe break out of that like grief cycle.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for sharing these experiences very close to your heart, I'm sure. But out of that, I suppose it also shapes you and gives you I guess, a depth, right, that you can speak from, especially
Yeah.
if you're speaking to someone who's faced a similar experience. And so if we could talk a little bit more into the area of like legacy and career work. Yeah, and bring us to a time when you were in the midst of your corporate job, but also having growing your side hustle. Like, yeah, what was it like, and how did you eventually make the break?
Yeah. So that's a nice segue actually, because it was an organic trajectory, really. Like I wasn't planning this all along. And I love that. I think it just kind of like life led me this way kind of, and I was intentional, but it wasn't part of a grand plan or anything. So I started my coaching journey while I was still at Google. I started with trainings that were done at Google by contractors who were hired by Google for people managers. I was immediately just hooked. I loved coaching, and I knew that it would, of course, like complement my role as a manager. I wanted to be good at guiding and developing my team. I remember the first training that I did was about asking questions. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is going to be interesting. I'm interested in knowledge, but like how to ask questions. Like I'm a great manager. But then once we dug deep, like I realized that I was asking these close-ended questions, like so simple, but so powerful. That was my like big light bulb moment of like, my questions were like, oh, Sarah, did you get that work done? Is this a good path for you? And it's all these like yes or no questions, which like, okay, that's nice. Like it's helpful, but really change happens, transformation happens, impact happens, growth happens when you ask these open questions, right? Of what was that like, or which one do you prefer, or how do you want to go about it? So that's when empowerment happens. So then I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I had never thought about it that way. And to let me change my approach. And that like very quick switch just made all the difference to my conversations with my reports at Google. So that's kind of how I got hooked. And then I did a whole coaching diploma certification, this time outside of Google, just to complement my role. And then that deepened my passion for it. As part of that diploma, I had to do some pro bono coaching and before I knew it, those clients very nicely and kindly wanted to continue beyond the required hours of my like certification. So it was never a grand plan, but it started to just kind of like grow organically from there. And then during my second maternity leave, I had time to reflect, and I had all that life stuff that I just talked about, right? Like happen as well. And it just kind of clicked for me that this wasn't just a hobby or like a side gig. It was kind of my true calling. I loved the impact that people were telling me that I was making in their lives, the connections I was building and that I was making with people, the growth that I was facilitating, and then also like the self growth because I was growing with it. So that's when I decided to take the leap and built my coaching practice and never looked back.
Wow, amazing. It's yeah, and it's quite encouraging to hear that it was a external validation that helped you to
Yes.
see this as something that you really wanted to continue in. So like the demand was already there, right? You didn't need to like search for it. Well, so actually on that, I want to hear what you, Merve, and your brand, your work, what are the common questions that you face from your clients? What is it that they're looking for? What do you provide in your coaching that is unique?
Yeah. In terms of what are people asking or what are people looking for, I like to think about it in three areas, okay? And they're all growth. So there are three things often people, leaders want to grow. They want to grow their business impact. This might be that it's their own business, or it might be that like the impact within their corporate careers. They want to grow their teams, okay? And that again could be in size or in performance often. They want to build these high performance, high trust teams, which is what I kind of call it. And then they want to grow themselves. They want to grow their own professional careers. So most of the questions that I get fall into these like three categories of the business impact, team, and careers. So for business impact, the biggest challenge often is too much to do, not enough time. So the work we do here is one of ruthless prioritization and asking the questions of, okay, well, what can you eliminate? What can you automate? What can you delegate? And what must you own when it comes to the most common frustration that I hear is around hiring the right talent. It's so important, hiring, but then also giving them the space to excel. Sometimes you hire the best people and then they're just not performing. And so then like the question is like, what's happening? So then the key here and the work that we do together with my clients here would be that skill will matrix. Okay. So is it a will problem? Is it a skill problem? Always hire for will and attitude and potential. Okay. And then train for skill. So then we look at if there's certain challenges, we look at like, is it a skill thing? Then do they need training? Do they need mentoring? Do they need extra support? Is it a will thing? In which case it's often harder. Then we try to get down to the bottom of that, right? And then in terms of professional growth, the biggest pain point is again a very simple but and yet very profound, powerful one. It boils down to the fundamental question of what do you really want? Oftentimes, especially leaders, like, and I will say I'll put my hand up and say that myself, that maybe I hadn't asked myself that question. Like I was very tuned in to my own leadership and to what I really wanted and my career plan, personal development plan. But then that like deeper question, maybe of that, like one extra layer of what do I really want? Sounds basic, but I hadn't really paused to think about it or given myself that time or that luxury to pause and reflect. So to help with this, we have a few different exercises, but one that I really love is called the Ikigai exercise. So it's borrowed from the Japanese concept, life purpose or meaning of life, which is sounds very deep, but it is basically in the exercise anyway, the intersection of four things, right? Like of what you love doing, what you're good at doing, what you can be paid for, so your monetizable skill set, and then what you think the world needs. So the intersection of these like four little sets or diagrams is your Ikigai, that's your life purpose. And then once you have found that, and again, I work with clients on this, so like ask certain questions. It's not like okay, here we go, here's my Ikigai. Like you have to kind of think deep and maybe sit on it for a while. But once you have found it, then it's really kind of becomes very enlightening and then guiding. It becomes your guiding principle, right? Then you can take these like what we call aligned actions towards growing your career and growing your own self.
Yeah, thanks for that really great summary of the top three areas. I think there's so much to. I wish we could have more time to like unpack it. Yeah, but maybe a small double clicking on that. One of the areas that I see you do really well is growing your own brand. I think that's part of professional growth within the organization as a business owner. I think that's also super important. How do you grow your personal brand?
Yeah, good question. I have a framework for that too. So just fundamentally, I call it the like ABCD framework. Okay. It's very simple. The A stands for authenticity. You have to be genuinely yourself. Very simple, but what most people aren't. You look online, I look on LinkedIn, I look on Instagram. Like, I'm not the biggest social media buff or anything. I don't want to post on LinkedIn, like, by the way, today sucks. I got out of bed and I was like sleep deprived. It's like, you don't want to necessarily be sharing everything, like, but you want to be authentically yourself when you are posting online or when you're showing up to an event, when you're talking to potential clients, when you're at a certain event or an environment where you're not necessarily even selling your products or your services. So authenticity is key so that you can build that trust with people and people can really believe you, right? Then the B is belief. You need to believe in what you're doing. Like you need to believe in what you're selling, what you're promoting. If you don't genuinely believe in it, then first of all, it kind of sucks because like you lack the passion is what that means. But you also want to have that drive to push it forward, especially if you're building your own business or if you're building a corporate career alongside being a partner and being a parent and like having a life outside of work. It's hard. So you need to have the drive. I think of this Steve Jobs quote saying the people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones that actually do, right? It's that belief that whatever it is that they're doing, whatever it is that they're committing to, that makes them achieve these crazy things, right? So belief, that's important. C is for consistency. It has the biggest compounding effect. Okay. Let's say that you're a senior individual contributor. I work with senior individual contributors who are aspiring leaders, right? You want to go into management. It's hard. People don't necessarily want to bet on you. Somebody needs to take a chance on you. But you need to be consistently saying, I want to be a people manager. Here's what I'm doing to be a people manager. I just mentored someone. They love me. Like I just did this like strategy deck. I'm doing business planning. I'm doing all this intentional work and I'm very consistent about it. And I'm consistently communicating it as well. At first, nobody might, it might seem like people aren't listening. Like, who am I talking to anyway? I'm not really making the impact. Same thing with social media. Like at first, 3 people like your post and it's like your mom, your husband, and like
Yourself.
random fake account. At first it's that. And then you like keep going and then it's like 2 people. And then like you keep going and then it's no people. And then it's 3 people again. But then all of a sudden it's 5 people and all of a sudden. So it has that like, you just need to consistently, because you have the belief and you're authentically yourself, you need to then consistently show up and be present and be consistent with what you're saying. And then D is for discipline. I'm a big fan of the saying, discipline gives freedom. It really, really does, because it's what keeps you going. It's especially on days when like motivation might not be really high, which let's face it, we all have those days. And then also it's grit. It's that hard work. Like I said, I'm going to build a business. So you know what? I'm going to build a business. I said, I'm a senior individual contributor. I'm going to be a leader. You know what? I'm going to be a leader. It might not be today, might not be tomorrow, might be next week, but like I'm going to do it and I'm going to be very disciplined about it. I think there's so much to be said for that. But just in a nutshell, and I know that like we don't have the time for this. This could be a whole workshop in itself, but I think of it as an onion, right? Like you have different layers in an onion. So the very core of it is your closest network. Okay. So go to your closest network. I'm building a business, or I'm going to be a leader, or I am going to get a promotion so that I can be a VP and I can have a wider team. I'm going to move careers from being a leader, being a director in consulting to like being a director in fintech or in the tech industry. So go and tell people. It's very humbling experience, but just like start there. Okay. They might first of all help you kind of like promote that brand. But then it's also like, okay, so now this is starting to be my brand. Is this thing that I want to do, this thing that I will do, this thing that's my intention, that's my goal. And then from there, like you go to the wider circles or the layers of the onion, right? Like then it's like the next layer, which is you introduce yourself, you provide value to them, you deliver on your promises. And then as you go to the next layer, these people they might not only not know you, trust you, like you, but also they might not know the product or the service or the line of work that you're doing. So then that might require a bit of education on the actual field before you then say like, okay, and by the way, I do that. So then when they have that need, then they know to come to you. So it's a long game, but it's extremely rewarding.
This being a podcast for working moms, do you see difference in how working moms have approached this in terms of growing themselves professionally, inside corporate, outside? Yeah.
I think some of the commonalities that I do notice, and I think, thank you for that question. I do think that we need to vocalize this and talk about this, is that women, they think more on self-worth versus men think more on the environment or others or the data. So I'll give you an example. Like if they're negotiating, for example, okay, or if they're selling something. Then to prepare, women will say like, okay, so am I really cut out for this? So it's a bit of imposter syndrome. Do I have the qualifications for this? Or they might be very self-confident. But then again, when they're preparing, they're saying like, I have the qualifications. This is what I've done. This is why I'm good for this. This is why it works out. This is why it should work out. So this is what I'm going to go to the market with. This is how I'm going to build my brand. This is how I'm going to negotiate. This is how I'm going to sell. Versus men, and this is a simplified picture, but men will say like, okay, well, the market is ready for this. Data shows that the industry size, or data shows that this is the going rate, or these are the like salary ranges, etc., or this is the demand numbers. Okay. They're already kind of almost confident or done with like them fitting into the game, but they're more thinking about like, well, how do I maybe influence or narrate so that this can fit into the market dynamics, the industry dynamics, the demand dynamics, or the dynamics of the specific audience that I'm like selling to, that I'm talking to, that I'm promoting to. I think that's the one thing that I noticed that like keeps coming, and
Interesting.
it has its depth in that like self-confidence and imposter syndrome. I don't know if there's anything specific about like moms or parents, but in terms of branding, I think this is the one big commonality I noticed.
Yeah, thanks. That's an interesting insight about the focus on having to prove themselves versus having the data to prove more objectively, I suppose.
Absolutely. I think women take things more personally somehow. And again, that comes from this history, I think, of needing to prove yourself. Like I just watched this movie, The Woman in the Sea. She had to prove to the world that women can swim the English Channel too. Like it's not a male thing. For men, it's like, okay, well, let's see if you can do it. And if you can't do it, no big deal. For women, it's like, well, women can't do it. You probably can't do it. Like you're a crazy person. You don't have the physical ability. And then we have to be like, well, what? I'm going to show you. So I think it just comes from that like historical, I need to prove to you that I am worth this. Whereas like for a typical male, it might be more about like, I need to prove to you that like product market fit or whatever it might be.
Well, I think we've come to almost the end of our time here, but out of this, what is one thing maybe you want our listeners to take away from your story?
Yeah, time goes by fast when you're having fun, Sarah. I think like leaning into your strengths, I think allowing yourself to be vulnerable and not taking yourself too seriously, maybe. Sometimes we take ourselves too seriously, especially women. Like when I started my own business, a lot of people told me like I was so brave for making the leap from a corporate leadership career where I had built that up like for a long time to then going back to like building something from scratch. But the truth is, what I do is my Ikigai, as we've talked about. And when things get tough, I always go back to my why. And yeah, sure, maybe it was brave, but also it's like you only live once. Like you need to kind of put yourself out there and be vulnerable, not take yourself too seriously. If it doesn't work out, what's the big deal? Do the next thing. And then like really leaning into your strengths and to your passions and having that like authenticity, belief, consistently discipline, and then you're unstoppable.
As easy as ABC.
Yes, it's as easy.
All right. Amazing. Thank you so much, Merve. Really appreciate your time with us here. And if anyone's interested in coaching, definitely we'll share all the resources and links in the episode show notes. And wishing you all the best for Leadrise.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This was great.
Thank you for listening to Make It Work, where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their careers whilst putting family first. Please help others discover the show by leaving a review and rating on wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Meanwhile, here's to you, making it work.